Welcome to the first installment of the AMA series hosted by the Operational Analytics Club. Twice a month, I will be interviewing a member of our data community, and all the questions I ask are crowdsourced. If you'd like to participate in an AMA or join the community, click the link in the post. Today, I got to interview Nadine Merheb, the Senior Manager of Strategy and Analytics of the Chicago Bulls. In this interview, you'll learn a ton about Nadine and her background, how she manages relationships with stakeholders, how she says no to stakeholders, and how she encourages them to adopt her projects. You'll learn about what it's like to work on a data team in the sports and entertainment industry, her future plans for data infrastructure at the Chicago Bulls, and you'll learn about Lebanese baklava. With no further ado, here's the interview. Thank you, everybody, for listening to this AMA. Today, I am joined by Nadine Merheb. I have not met Nadine, so this is a new experience for me and all of you guys. So, Nadine, I'd love to just hear a little bit about your experience at the Chicago Bulls, what you're doing.
Yeah. I started with the Bulls about a year and a half ago now. And so I came in to really take over all things related to data. It's kind of one of those catch-all things where you work on a bunch of random things and they're all related to data, but it could be things like process improvements. It could be building dashboards. It could be, like providing training for teams or, just like a whole host of different things. And basically I work on the business side of the house. So I support the ticketing, partnerships, marketing, community relations, like all of the business departments, rather than like the team or player performance stuff, which is what we call sports analytics. So that's a little quick piece.
Gotcha. Okay, there were many questions that came about player performance. Disclaimer, she's not doing the player analytics, just so we're clear. She's doing something just as cool, if not cooler. And we got several questions for this AMA. So I talked about this last week with a ton of people, and they submitted a lot of questions. So we're going to go through a lot of those questions, starting with like some of the more, broad ones, and then get down into the nitty gritty. But before that, I am curious how you went from running a bakery to now being the manager of strategy and analytics at the Bulls.
Yeah, I started a bakery a couple of years after graduating college, and it was one of those like, might as well do it now, like don't have a ton of like responsibilities and things like that. And so like if I fail, I can fail. It was a really great experience in terms of like it was just me. I was doing all of the baking, the sales, the accounting, the dishwashing. And it
From your house?
I was working out of a commercial kitchen, but some of the like work stuff was out of my house. But I would like show up so I would sell my products wholesale to some of the grocery stores in Chicago. So I would like walk in and be like, oh, can I speak to a manager, and like bring them a sample, and then follow up like 10 times. And after a year of doing that, the commercial kitchen that I was at closed down. And so I just kind of took a pause and thought about if I wanted to continue doing it, and decided that I wanted to go back into more of like the analytics space that I had been working in. And so I ended up finding a job at Uber Freight, which was like their logistics startup. And then from there I made the jump to the Bulls, and it was like in the same field. So that one wasn't quite as wild of a jump.
And what was your best product when baking? What was your favorite thing to make? What was the best thing you made? The things that would make the bakers get excited?
So I really specialized in making Lebanese baklava, which is not something that you really see in stores often. A lot of the baklava that you see is more like Greek or maybe even Turkish, where it's got cinnamon or honey or things like that. And Lebanese baklava is like a simple syrup that has orange blossom water, or like rose water. And so it's a little bit lighter. And I was like, all right, I want to bring, a piece of this to the community that I'm a part of. And so I did 3 flavors. I would do pistachio, I would do walnut, and then I would do cashew. And those were like my 3 products. And I would, it was easy because all I had to do was change the filling. So there's a little bit of economies of scale that I was going for there. But yeah, I mean, I still make it today. It doesn't quite rival my mom's, but it's close.
Okay, I'm gonna get into the. I just have one more question on that. Do
Yeah.
you think you're working less hours, or is it less stressful being in data and strategy than it is to be a baker?
I would say yes, with the caveat of it was because I was doing everything. So I worked in a bakery that was not my own, and all I had to do was bake, and that was like great. All I had to do was worry about making the things better and staying on schedule. And when it was my own business, I had to worry about sales and marketing, and I did the product design and like making sure that the ingredients are going to go bad or whatever else. So there was a lot more stuff that I was responsible for. And I would say that that was definitely more stressful than analytics because even though there's no right way to like do anything in this field, there is at least like I know exactly what I'm trying to do, or like I can figure it out. I can build on what I knew before. Um, it feels a little bit more like the same stuff that I'm working on as opposed to trying to learn all of these different functions.
I can imagine that. And so, starting with some of the questions that we got from the AMA, there's three that I think are really interesting about working with stakeholders. The first one is how do you build and improve relationships with stakeholders? This could be at Chicago Bulls or just what you've learned previously.
Yeah. I would say that the biggest thing is really that the people that we work with want to be heard. Um, it's I've always come in and looked to learn from them in terms of like they're the functional experts, like they're the experts in their domain, and it's helpful to first get an understanding of what it is that they do, like what's important to them, what are the goals and objectives that they have or that their teams have, and then once you understand that, then you can like start to get into more of like um, the more common parts of relationship building that I guess you hear, which is like be reliable, like making sure that the product that you're delivering is of good quality, like making people want to trust you. But I would say that one of the biggest gaps or most common gaps that I have seen or heard about is really um, missing in terms of uh, like what it is that they are striving for, as opposed to just coming in and saying like, well, we think the right way to do it is this. Hear them out and hear what they have to say. Um, Someone at the Bulls had this quote of, um, oh, what was it? It was people need to know how much you care to care about what you know. And so it's like not just about the work, it's about being easy to work with and like caring about all the things that they're saying too.
So you're saying that you focus on totally understanding what their goals are, what their business objectives are, understanding the person themselves, and then from there focusing on like delivering on time, building plans with them.
Yeah, exactly. I find that it's a lot easier when you're trying to like speak their language and speak towards like, hey, this is going to help you achieve X, Y, and Z that we already talked about. It just places it a little bit better for them.
Great. I love that answer. And the next one, this one's super hard for me just because I've experienced the difficulty of it. So when you deliver a project or you deliver a new process for your stakeholders, or just a way for them to gain insight with data, how do you follow up and make sure that they're actually using what you've built?
Yeah, that is a good question. So I would say that the answer to the previous question is partially relevant. Like having a strong relationship is going to help them trust that the stuff that you're providing is of quality and like worth taking into consideration or worth taking action on. And also like being able to understand the business means that the insights that you'll deliver are more tailored to what they care about. So if we're making, I've seen it a lot, and I wouldn't say that I've been good at this the whole time. I've like, learned my way through this, but there were times where if I earlier in my career when I didn't understand the business and I would make a recommendation, people were hesitant to like really take action on that because it was like, well, no, that doesn't make sense for us. We have, this other thing that's a priority, or like we have to take into consideration like these factors. And so now I try to make sure that anything that I'm recommending is really based on those original conversations and like understanding what they're doing and what they're driving for. So always tying it back to their business objectives. And one of the ways that I recently have tried to like build that up a little bit is um, if we take an example of like building a dashboard, a lot of times it's about making sure people know how to use it. And like I can show, hey, I found these insights by doing this. So I'll write a little like recap email. I'll link the exact view that I was using so they know like where to find it. And then I'll say, based on this, I think we should maybe try doing this month. So it's like kind of like feeding it at small increments so that they're digestible, but like really trying to get behind some of the strategy that we can um, like things that we can do based on the stuff that we're seeing in the data.
I remember in my first job, I don't recommend this to anybody, but I used to have a separate Google Analytics account, and I would add UTMs to whatever project I was delivering them so that I could see if they looked at it, which
Yeah,
is super spiteful. And that's not going to help anyone's relationship. But yeah, I
I
think your
do.
method's a lot better.
I do creep on like the who has seen this in Tableau for sure.
And another one, this was a conversation that we had this week in the Operational Analyst Club, the community that's hosting this event. How do you say no to stakeholders when they ask you for something?
I would say that this is the thing that I might be worst at. I don't ever outright say no to anything, which has its consequences. But the way that I've tried to at least make it manageable is it's one of two things that instead of saying no, I'll say. And it'll be like, what are you trying to accomplish? So that I'm not just like saying yes to anything. I'm making sure that the stuff that they're trying to do um, is answering, it's like tied to their goals, it's tied to the actions that they're looking to take, so that I have a better sense of like what it is that they want to see. And then the other one is not right now. Everybody has like you could keep on working, like the workload doesn't ever end. And so being able to say like, hey, it's not that this isn't important or that I'm not going to get to it, but like here are the things that I'm working on right now that I have to prioritize, and just giving them a sense more of like when it could be accomplished. Like, hey, I can't do this right now, but like in a couple of weeks, I can start to work on it, something like that. So maybe reframing it so that it's not a no.
And um, when you reframe it, like, are you adding projects to a huge backlog for your data team, or is it really just like, hey, like this quarter we're really focusing on these initiatives? Uh, should we just visit this? Like, should we talk about this in another month or two?
Yeah, it's a good question. It's a little bit of both. So I keep track of it so that we don't lose sight of it. But our team sets 90-day priorities, so that we are being a little bit more like selective and like we can manage better our workload. So we have priorities that we've set about with outputs or projects or products that we're working on. And then I can use that backlog for the next 90 days to say like, hey, I'm going to pull from these things and um, be able to slot it in the next 3 months. I wouldn't say that that's like always the rule. There are projects that pop up, and depending on how much impact or urgency they have, they might have to be slotted in. Um, but that's part of um, the relationship that I've built with stakeholders, is being able to say like, hey, we know that you're important and we're not losing sight of your things. We're trying to make, them work. We just have to find the time for it.
Okay. And Oh, this next one's fun. Okay, so going back to the initial thing that you said, you don't work in player analytics, but you are in the sports and entertainment industry. How has this culture or just industry been different than working at, say, Uber or one of your previous companies?
Yeah, I would say that there are some pretty big differences in working in sports and in other things. Um, like the biggest one maybe is the culture. Like everyone is so excited all the time to be at work and to be doing cool things, and like it's a bit of the environment, right? Like our office is in the United Center where the team plays, and so there's all of this,
Oh, that's cool.
memorabilia, and like on game days, people are, dressed up if they're in sales, or maybe you see Benny the Bull walking around the office, things like that. And so like there is that bit of excitement that comes with it, and you get to see like your work play out. You go to a game and you're looking in the arena and you're like, hey, I really contribute to this. Um, but there are different things about the work too. Uh, a lot of times, it's not the case always, but at the Bulls it is, where we have this huge brand, right? It's global and we have fans all over the world. But we're this tiny team. I think the whole front office is like 150 people. And so you can imagine that like there is a lot of responsibility that we're taking on and a lot of impact that we're driving as a result. Um, so it's a very cool environment to be in. And then analytics is a little bit newer in sports versus in like other industries, or like being built data first, as some of the more like recent startups and like Uber, for example, are. Um, and so there is this balance that we have to try to strike between building a really strong foundation as we like become more digital first and data driven, while also not like losing sight of the fact that we have to continue to innovate and push the envelope. And so like an example of that is all of the Web3 stuff and like the NFTs, and like the Chicago Bulls have like pursued that. And at the same time, we're also thinking about like how do we make sure that we're just capturing our data the right way and like putting it in a place that makes it usable and not siloed and things like that. So there's like two sides to the coin.
Yeah.
Yeah,
And they contradict each other a lot, where it's like, we need to do this. It's like, we haven't even figured out how to manage any of the data that we already have.
yeah,
Not say
exactly.
any data, but it's like, it's a very hard balance.
Yeah, exactly. Especially if you don't have the time to like think about all of the new stuff that you're trying to chase from a data perspective. We try to be really thoughtful about that, but sometimes we just have to move so quickly that we kind of have to think about it after the fact and slot it in, or like figure out how to make it work with what we've got.
Yeah, I think that's for me, that's been the biggest challenge for sure, is just deciding like, okay, like when is it time to just like build and clean up versus when is it time just to deliver because the business needs to move, the insights need to be delivered. So I haven't
Mm-hmm.
figured that answer, and I'm doing a blog right now to kind of analyze that.
No, I will be excited to read it.
And the next question we got is what changes, oh, goes right along with this. What changes have you made to the data product or data team operations since you arrived at the Pulse?
Yeah. Um, One of the other things that's a little bit unique to sports is like the vendors that we work with. Given that we are a smaller team, we end up using a lot of vendors for things. And so when I first came here, um, a lot of the data related stuff was very out of the box. And it was, you know, a vendor that would say, like, here's what this team is doing. And then they would just like plug and play with our team, plug and play, plug and play. And so you lose the ability to customize and be nimble, and like have it really tailored to our unique business processes. So the first thing that I really did was make sure that we brought a little bit more of that ownership in house. Um, Things like being able to create our own data sources, so that when we defined fields or wrangled the data, it like made sense for what we were trying to accomplish. Um, and that in turn like improved the speed to insights, we built a lot of reporting on top of that for teams that maybe hadn't been able to see their data before, or like be more purposeful about those reports, like having them actually be used operationally day to day, or like have visibility into parts of the business that weren't there before. And then as that was built, the organization has this like hunger and thirst for data, which is really great. It means that people won't come to us and say like, hey, I want to know this, this, and that, and I'm looking for this. Can you do this? And so what that has meant is that our team has grown a little bit. And so I'm working on building out our data strategy and analytics team. And that team is a little bit more technical, like focused on owning applications like the data warehouse and the CRM and the data sources and things like that. And in turn, also up leveling the like skills of the rest of our strategy and analytics team. So teaching SQL, like teaching how to do things in Tableau, just kind of building out those technical capabilities that help complement all of the skills that we already have in like the strategy space.
Okay, so as you're growing the team, you're making your existing team more technical, more able to manage like the data warehouse and all the insights, and you're also hiring on new individuals.
Yeah, correct.
And are the new people that you're hiring, are there specific roles that you're hiring for? Are these like entry level data analysts?
On my team, they've been entry level or like a couple of years into the career. On our team in general, in general, it is based on like what our needs are. But we've seen some other roles open on our team besides that, and it's kind of with that data analyst, business analyst lens that we're looking.
And this is one of the questions that we got is what recommendations do you have for an undergrad or someone early in their career to land a job in data? So perfect example. So if you're hiring a new data analyst that's fresh out of college or maybe it's just had one job, what are you looking for? Because obviously they're not going to have all the experience that you might be looking for.
Yeah, I would say that the thing that stands out to me the most, or like the way to differentiate yourself, is the soft skills and being able to highlight those soft skills versus just the technical ones. Don't get me wrong, the technical skills are important, but those are things that can be taught more easily. And so when I say soft skills, I mean things like being able to communicate well, being able to understand the business, um, building strong relationships, influencing change, being a problem solver. I think so much of this role, or like roles in this space, are about being able to solve problems. And it doesn't have to necessarily be that you're solving problems in the data, or like, I mean, if you're new to a role or you're coming out of undergrad or a master's program or whatever it is, maybe you don't have that experience. But if you can talk about experiences that would be relevant where you built these skills, like I find that helpful.
I'm assuming you did that with baking, where when you went into Uber, you're like, hey, I learned how to run a business, not just
Mm-hmm.
about banking, sell it a lot more, teach them
Yeah.
exactly what you learned.
Yeah. Well, I mean, at Uber, I was supporting the account management team. And so I came in and I was like, I mean, I did all of this stuff myself. I was doing the analytics or all of the data like keep, keeping. But I was also doing like the sales and account management. So I tried to flex a little bit that even though it was a totally different industry and a totally different scale, like at least I was playing around in that space. Um, that's, I mean, and there's always going to be things that you can carry over from your experiences that
Mhm.
you can relate to whatever job it is that you're trying to pursue.
And another question we got was, so right now your data team is hiring like pretty rapidly. It sounds like you guys are building it up. And what recommendations do you have for someone that is in that position? Like the data team's growing, they just got to the company. How do they stand out in the pack?
Um, a great question. Um, Finding a way to be indispensable. I think is a good way to do that. Um, and part of it is some of those skills that I just mentioned. I think being able to build strong relationships is um, really huge in this space. But also like being able to be a self-starter. If you don't know how to do something, like, can you figure it out? Like, do you hear that there is this need in the business and then you're like, oh, I want to figure out how to solve for that? Or maybe you're newer to a technical skill like Tableau or SQL or something like that, and you're like, well, I'm trying to do this thing and I'm going to have to go figure out how to do it. All of the skills that I have been self-taught. I didn't learn SQL in school or Tableau or any of that. And so like just being able to say like, hey, I'm curious, hey, I want to figure it out, that's going to go a long way.
That's interesting because I do agree with you, but something that we have at my company, well, the company I work for, Census, is like if you aren't an expert at something, um, like talk to somebody else that is an expert in that before you try to learn it all on your own.
Mm-hmm.
So like those conflict, but like I kind of agree with both of them. Do you have a take on that?
I think they kind of go hand in hand. Um, I think that the like best questions that you can ask that expert are going to come from having some experience fumbling your way through something, because then you can really understand what they're saying as opposed to trying to like, you know, ask them every question that you can think of or like really learn and then go to figure it out and realize that you didn't really understand it fully, or like there are still
Or you
pieces
ask the wrong
missing,
question to the person.
or you asked the wrong question. Exactly. So I think some combination of both is important. Like definitely being able to like ask others. I mean, that's part of the reason why I found myself in this community or in other data communities, because I didn't really have many folks to lean on in my organization. So I looked outside of it so that I could find people to ask the questions to when I got stuck. Because there's a limit to what you can Google. Sometimes it's a little bit more conceptual than like, hey, there's this one thing, and how do you do a VLOOKUP or whatever it is.
Or you'll look up something on Google, you'll be reading a blog, and then you realize that you have to buy something in order to find the answer.
Yeah,
Or you have
yeah,
to start a trial or something. It's like, dang it,
yeah,
I thought I was gonna get the answer I needed.
yeah, exactly.
Um, and then that is all the questions from the audience. One last question I have is, what are the future plans for the data organization in terms of like infrastructure? Like, uh, what's the next big thing you're going to do to clean up the data or make the data just way more accessible to the organization?
Yeah, we are working on this big project to reassess whether our tech stack or data and tech stack is meeting our needs. And so I think part of that is really about making sure that we are able to integrate our data and able to like not have these siloed areas, but also have some automation. Like we want to be able to push things to different systems and like allow them to talk to each other so that we can start to build initiatives around that. And so that's kind of like our next big hurdle is we've gotten we've this last year we've done a really great job of building visibility, like getting the organization to be like more data driven, and wanting that insight. And now the next step is making ourselves a little bit more efficient with data. How do we automate things if we can, or speed up the process where we can, integrate things so that it doesn't have to be a bunch of manual clicks, things like that.
Awesome. And is this just, are you at the beginning of this process, or is it like something that like is still down the road? Like, okay, like we need to focus on insights now. We'll build that later.
Um, we're kind of smack dab in the middle of it. We've done a bunch of discovery workshops inside the organization to understand current state and like what are the objectives for the next few years and all of that. And now we're in this phase of trying to figure out what our best option to go forward with is. And that's kind of where we're spending a lot of our time. And a lot of it has been researching what other people are doing in the space, or talking to vendors, or trying to say like, hey, if we do this, what does that look like? And trying to like envision that. Um, once we make a decision, then I would say there's a whole other phase of the project that kicks off where we actually have to put all that stuff into place. Um, we're going to have to like tailor it to our needs. We're going to have to make sure that all the stuff that we can do today is able to be done in the future when we set it up. So that's something that we're hoping to tackle during the season so that by the time the next off season hits, we can really roll it out to everybody.
Okay. Am I holding you too long? I have one more question on that.
No, go ahead.
Okay. So when you finally build this out and you've adopted new infrastructure and you have to set it up, uh, do you communicate that with your stakeholders? Like, would you have to say something like, "Hey, like, we're adopting these new systems. It's going to be a learning curve. It's going to take us time. As a result, we're not going to be able to provide as much service as we have in the past."
That's a good question. There will definitely be trade-offs because we only have so much time. We have tried to make sure that we are bringing them in from the beginning so that they have an input, so that they are aware that changes are going to be made. And like we are definitely considerate of the amount of time it'll take to implement and the time it'll take to go through change management and roll things out and get people comfortable. Um, while all that stuff is happening, we have tried to do as much as we can to set things up before the season starts so that we can spend a little bit less time in that area. It's a little bit more self-serve at the moment. We can turn our attention to like the infrastructure piece, and the other stuff won't go away completely, but like for a majority of the time, that way we're able to focus on that implementation piece, and then we will slowly build that back up as that stuff is set up. That's the plan, at least.
I didn't realize that you do. Well, I mean, you don't have an off season, but in a sense, you do. So I'm assuming
Yeah.
that the months outside of the actual season, is it more manageable, or is it pretty much the same from the operations side?
I would say it's the opposite.
Really?
In the off
Dang it! I was
season,
really hoping you had an off season.
I know. So in the off season, which ends up being our summer months, we really are helping prepare for the upcoming season. And most of the teams have game day related responsibilities throughout the season. So um, you'll always hear people say like, "Oh, we're going to do that in the off season. We'll do that in the off season." And so you hear it enough times. There's so many projects to take on during the off season, and that's really where my team comes in. And so the off season tends to be our like very project heavy type of work,
Yeah.
whereas in season is a little bit more maintenance, like hey, we did this thing and we're not seeing it, like, small tweaks, but not like major ones. So, yeah.
Well, I'm sad to hear that, but it also makes perfect sense because I've been in that position too. Like in the real estate industry, there's like a real estate season, and I was an analyst, and I realized that outside of the real estate season, like the winter month, no easier. It's like
Yeah. You
same
hope it
same
slows
thing.
down, but no.
Great. I really appreciate it. And for those listening, I had technical issues at the beginning of this, and Nadine was able to wait 30 minutes. So she gave me extra time. She gives you guys extra time. So I really appreciate it. And it was great to meet you.
Yeah, absolutely. It was great to meet you too. Thanks so much.